big day for Trump's legal issues. Former President Trump is expected to be in court today for a hearing in the federal classified documents case against him. In Fort Pierce, Florida, U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon is set to hear arguments on two of Trump's motions to dismiss the charges against him. The first argues Trump was allowed to store classified documents in unlocked rooms at his club under the Presidential Records Act. So this, he claims, was all good. The second motion claims the main statute used to form charges against the former president is unconstitutionally vague. In that interview yesterday with the right-wing network Newsmax, Trump defended his actions.
I took them very legally, and I wasn't hiding them. We had boxes on the front of and a lot of those boxes had clothing, and we're moving out, okay? Unfortunately, we're moving out of the White House. I had the right to do it, in my opinion, and in my lawyer's opinion, and everything else.
Let's bring in former litigator, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Lisa, good morning.
Good morning.
Apologies for putting this to you again, because we've addressed this 1,000 times. The Presidential Records Act.
Yes.
Does it cover what Donald Trump did?
It does not cover what Donald Trump did. Willie, there's a definition in the Presidential Records Act for what could count as personal and what is presidential. Donald Trump's argument is effectively, it's presidential if I classified it as such in my mind, and everything in my mind was personal before it's personal if I say it so in my mind, and everything in my mind that I took with me was personal. Therefore, there can be no criminal prosecution against me.
Right. So, again, apologies for making you answer that question for the 1,000th time, but we'll keep doing it as long as Donald Trump makes that argument. So, more broadly speaking, this classified documents case, where are we? We're hearing about Judge Cannon and some delays. Where are we in this progress of actually bringing this to trial?
Well, you'll remember that a couple weeks ago, Judge Cannon had a hearing where she took argument from both sides about when this case should be tried. She has yet to issue a scheduling order setting a trial date. And in the meantime, she is hearing argument today on two motions to dismiss. I'm not a betting person. I'd probably make a miserable one. But the fact that she hasn't set a trial date and yet has set oral argument on two motions to dismiss makes me think maybe she thinks she could get rid of this case entirely without having to set a trial date. And that really is a frightening prospect, I think, given the gravity of the charges here and the panoply of evidence that supports those charges.
So what's going to be the state's defense then? What will we hear from them today as they try to counter what Judge Cannon may or may, your theory, maybe looking to just make the whole thing go away? What's their argument going to be?
I think their argument is going to be, first of all, that the Presidential Records Act doesn't support the interpretation and almost the perversion that Donald Trump is trying to give to it. That the Presidential Records Act would hold that any number of the things Donald Trump took with him are inherently presidential. They should have gone to the National Archives. There was a process to follow, that the people in the White House surrounding Donald Trump were well aware of that process and in communication with the National Archives before he left the White House, let alone in a new process that started months afterwards when the National Archives brought to their attention, hey, we're missing a bunch of stuff. That includes the Kim Jong-un letter, the letter Barack Obama left for you, etc. And that kicked off a process, basically a cat and mouse game, where the National Archives and them, the Department of Justice and the FBI, were chasing after Trump to collect all the things that he took. And as you well know, he was not honest with them at any step of that process. He, in fact, deluded his own lawyers, Christina Bobb, Evan Corcoran, sort of suckered them into it by having the boxes moved in this bizarre three-card Monte that he was playing with his own legal team. I don't think that'll hold up. In terms of the unconstitutional vagueness of the statute here, he's talking about the willful retention of national defense documents. He says, among other things, that the phrase national defense is unconstitutionally vague. He says that the unauthorized retention is another aspect of what's unconstitutionally vague here. We all know that this statute has been used to prosecute many other people of lesser stature in this country who have never made such an argument, let alone have a court sustain it.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because you've recently a National Guardsman in Massachusetts. Yes. I believe he got 21 years. 21 years in prison, yes, because of what he did, which granted was pretty egregious, but at the same time shows that the classification system is completely broken, reality winner. How can, with a straight face, nothing will happen to Donald Trump when what he did was equally egregious in terms of the crimes of these other low-ranking very low-ranking soldiers and defense contractor.
Elise, we see that all around us, right? We see that in the federal election interference case, too, where 950 people have been sentenced and convicted for crimes associated with January 6th when the instigator-in-chief remains free from trial right now. It's no different here. Donald Trump is immune to arguments that other people are doing time for the same things he has done, and in many cases, he has done worse.
So, Lisa, I'm curious. I understand this is the reality. This is the process. This is the judge that we have in this case. But if Trump is not held accountable for taking classified documents into his possession to his club and leaving them in open boxes, claiming they are his, getting his workers to be involved in what is ostensibly a crime, what's the precedent that will set if somehow he skates from this?
I think it's a terrible precedent, Mika, which is why people like me are so concerned about the rule of law and its survival in the post-Trump and during Trump era. The notion that a former president can escape to their private residence with boxes upon boxes of hundreds of classified documents or documents that otherwise affect the national defense, lie about it, enlist maintenance workers and valets in that crime, expect them to take the fall and then walk away scot-free and then potentially get elected to the office again. That's unfathomable.
And not just take the documents, but obstruct all the attempts to have those recovered as well.
I'm really struck by the clip you guys played of Greg Kelly interviewing him where he said, no one's been treated worse than Trump. I'd flip that around and say, no one has treated us worse than Trump has treated us.
He's skating on this. We'll see if that continues. He'll be in court in Florida today trying to get this dismissed.